Hello, and welcome to Dark Hearts with Stacey Lee. I sure appreciate you spending a little of your day with me. Have I got a story for you today? This is one of the strangest, most mysterious cases of human behavior I have ever heard of, and I think you're going to feel the same way after hearing it. Today we are talking about what happens when someone gets paranoid and the paranoia spreads. The phenomenon is known as Folie, deux, which means shared madness. It is a fascinating and rare condition where people in a close relationship begin to share delusional beliefs and experiences. Psychiatrists don't know why it happens or how it happens, and like I said, it is very, very rare. But when it does happen, it is disturbing and it is interesting. This is the story of the Tromp family and the most bizarre road trip ever. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe if you want to see more from me. It helps a lot. I'm your host, Stacey Lee. Let's begin. Our story begins in Sylvan, Victoria in Australia. August is the last month of winter in Australia, and so the temperatures were starting to rise. It's their spring in August down there. Sylvan is located 24 miles east of Melbourne. It's a tiny area of only 1,300 people. The area has rich soil and many fruits, vegetables, and flowers are grown there. The town has an annual tulip festival that attracts 100,000 visitors, and it is one of the most successful flower festivals in the world. One of the families living in Sylvan is the Tromp family. The family is made up of 51-year-old Mark Tromp, his wife Jacoba, and their three kids, Riana, 29, Mitchell, 25, and Ella, 22. The family established a successful farm growing red currant, and they owned dirt moving equipment as well, which they used to run an excavation company. The family was close, they had great relationships, and they had a good life. But in the late winter of 2016, Mark and Jacoba started to act strangely. The father and mother of this well-respected family began to believe that they were being tracked. They didn't say by who, but they believed they were being watched. They also began talking about their money, how it wasn't safe in the bank, and how they were worried about their finances, even though the family farm was doing well. In the weeks leading up to the event we're going to discuss, Mark and Jacoba's paranoia grew until the two began to believe that their lives were in danger. They saw signs in everyday events. They became more and more stressed, and their adult children watched, concerned, and confused. On August 29th, 2016, Mark and Jacoba announced to their kids that they were taking a road trip. But this wasn't to be any old road trip. This was going to be a tech-free road trip. No one was going to be allowed to take their phones, their computers, their music devices, and most disturbingly, the family was not taking their credit cards with them. The parents also told their kids to leave their passports at home. The adult kids were confused. They asked, "How long are we going to be gone?" Their parents didn't know. They asked, "Where are we going?" Their parents didn't know. The kids became more confused when their parents told them that they would not be bringing any luggage with them, and they were leaving immediately. Now, the adult kids protested a bit, but their parents seemed scared. Did they know something that their kids did not? They had never seen their parents act this way, and it frightened them. The kids also began to feel a sense of danger and impending doom, and their parents were insistent. The family was getting in the car, and they were leaving now. All 5 family members piled into this small 2016 silver Peugeot and drove away from their house. When they did, they left all of their personal belongings behind. They didn't lock the doors to the house, and they left the family horses unattended with only a day's worth of food and water. Mark Tromp began driving. And driving and driving. He drove more than 1,000 miles, heading north through New South Wales and then beyond. The kids sat in the back seat, worried and wondering what was happening. And then it got worse. Mark drove all day and into the night. They stopped in Bathurst, New South Wales, 500 miles from home. Now, Mitchell was fed up at this point. He did not believe anything his parents were telling him, and he was determined to get out of this car. He had also secretly brought his phone with him, even though his parents told him not to. And when the family was only 18 miles from home, Mark realized that his son Mitchell had brought his phone. So Mark grabbed the phone from his son's hand and threw it out the car window. This made Mitchell very angry. So now, by the time they got to Bathurst, he was angry, he was confused, and he was tired. He was tired of driving. While the rest of the family members were distracted during a stop, Mitchell slipped away. He got on a train and headed for home. Now, I would think this might have snapped Mark and Jacoba out of it, but it did not. After realizing that Mitchell was gone, they told the girls to get back in the car, and Mark continued to drive. And that is when Riana and Ella began to feel it. A suffocating paranoia, a real feeling of danger and a sense of doom. Their parents were practically in a panic, and now so were the girls. It was like a virus was spreading among them. Mark was talking about getting off the grid. He'd only brought cash with him because he said the family credit cards were being tracked. And then Mark and Jacoba started talking about their belief that someone was trying to kill them. As the very long drive wore on, Ella began to calm down. As the girls listened to the things their father and mother were saying, Ella began to realize that this was not right. Their parents were not okay. She began to question her father's grip on reality. Mark was talking about the fact that he'd taken great measures to ensure the family's safety, but this was getting more and more bizarre, and Ella was beginning to realize she was not safe with her family. Riana was not as convinced of that. Maybe her father really was trying to save his family. Maybe he knew something she didn't. Mark continued to drive. By the next morning, a Tuesday, the remaining four headed east from Bathurst to the Jennelon Caves, which is a popular tourist spot. As the family took a break, the two girls began to speak out of earshot. They were away from their parents for a moment. Ella told Riana that they had to get away from their parents. Something was not right, and she knew it. As Mark and Jacoba were walking around in the tourist area, Ella and Riana stole a car. Think how desperate they must have been to commit an auto theft. They really wanted to get out of there. Once the girls had stolen the car, Ella began to drive. The two sisters drove south to the town of Goulburn and contacted the police. Cops sat bewildered at this story. What do you mean your parents left their house unattended with no luggage, no phones, and no credit cards? Ella and Riana said they wanted to report their own parents missing, and so the police took a report. Now, there was no way to reach Mark and Jacoba. They had no phones. And this area is not the Australian outback. It's not remote. The family had driven through some large towns and tourist destinations. But now the girls had no idea where their parents were. The police took the bizarre report, and then Ella and Riana got back into the stolen car. I was thinking that it was odd that Ella and Riana drove to a police station in a stolen car, but then I found an article that states they called the police from a payphone. Other articles say they met with the police. I can't be sure on which is right. But after reporting their parents missing, Ella and Riana were off again, and that is when they decided to part ways. Ella said she was going home to feed the horses. Riana did not want to go with Ella. I looked and looked as to why she wouldn't want to go with her sister. I am going to take a guess and say Riana was still convinced that someone was after the family. She had left with her sister, but maybe she still harbored a fear that someone was waiting back at the house for them. So Ella headed home, not realizing that her sister was having a mental crisis. Riana had been infected with this virus. Whatever her parents were dealing with, it had now affected Riana. She had become convinced that she was in danger. With her sister Ella now gone, Riana secretly climbed into the back of a utility vehicle in Goulburn. The driver of that truck returned to the vehicle, and then he began to drive. Riana stayed hidden in the back of the truck. After driving for an hour, the man heard something and he stopped the truck. He later told the press that he got out and looked in the back and discovered Riana curled up and catatonic. He said, I turned around and saw two legs stretched out across the back between my seat and the floor. She was lying on the floor. I got an extreme shock. He asked Riana her name. and she couldn't remember it. He asked Riana where she was from. She didn't know. Riana had cracked. She had no idea who she was or where she was. The man called the police and Riana was taken to Goulburn Hospital where she was placed in psychiatric care. Now, this story begins to make its way to the Australian press. Journalists heard the story about the missing persons report filed by the girls, and they heard that Mark and Jacoba had driven off, whereabouts unknown. At first, the press was somewhat bemused by the story. Articles were written that kind of made light of the situation. A crackpot dad and mom who had gone off the deep end, believing they were being hunted by someone who wanted to kill them. So much so that they'd forcefully taken their adult children on this bizarre road trip. But as the days wore on, people became more and more concerned about Riana and about Mark and Jacoba. The police in Goulburn contacted the police in Sylvan, and officers were sent to the Tromp family house. When they arrived, only Ella was at home. She'd come home to an unlocked house and horses that needed feeding. She explained the entire ordeal to the police, who were now genuinely concerned about Mark, Jacoba, Mitchell, and Riana. There was no sign of them. The police continued to watch the house, and on Wednesday morning, Mitchell arrived. He'd been on the train all night Tuesday in order to get back home. Mark and Jacoba had continued to drive until they reached Wangaratta. There, a man experienced a very disturbing incident. As this man was driving, Mark and Jacoba, in their silver car, began tailgating this man. The man became angry and he pulled over. The silver car pulled over as well. When the man got out of his car, Mark got out of his and began running right at the other man. Then Mark abruptly stopped in the middle of the road and stared at the other driver. This man was disturbed, not knowing what this maniac was going to do next. After Mark stood staring at this man for an uncomfortable length of time, standing in the middle of the road, he simply turned and walked into the trees at Marrowa Park. The driver got back into his car and got out of there. With Mitchell back at home, he informed the police that he'd last seen his parents at the Jennelin Caves, so officers were sent there to search for Mark and Jacoba. They did not find them. What no one knew at this time is that Mark had done the unthinkable. He had abandoned Jacoba and walked into the bushland. Mark had literally just pulled over, leaving his wife in the car, and walked into the trees. On Thursday, September 1st, Mitchell appeared on the state news, standing alongside police officers. Mitchell made a plea, appealing to the public, asking that people help find his father and mother. Mitchell told the press, "My father is scared that people are after him. He's not in a good state of mind. I've never seen anyone like this or anyone conduct themselves in this way. I just really want my dad to be found. He's not dangerous. He's my mate, my father. I love him." Hours later, reports began coming into the police in Yaz. There was a disoriented woman walking in the streets. It was obvious that she was in need of assistance. She was walking around aimlessly and appeared to be lost, but she wasn't responding to questions when passersby attempted to assist her. So now we've got Mitchell and Ella back at the house. Raina is in a psychiatric hospital in Goulburn. Mark has wandered into the forest, and it's Jacoba that has been found incoherent and wandering the streets in Yaz. It is very, very bizarre. Jacoba had driven away from the forest after Mark abandoned her, and she'd driven another 215 miles to Yaz. Why she stopped there, who knows? Jacoba was taken to the hospital and admitted in Yaz, where doctors realized she was suffering some sort of mental crisis. Friday came and went. There was no sign of Mark Tromp. But then, on Saturday, September 3rd, a citizen of Wangaratta called the police and told them that a man was running alongside the street on the outskirts of town. The man was disheveled and had this wild look in his eyes, and this person was concerned and thought it might be Mark Tromp. They were right. The police arrived at the location, and there he was. Mark Tromp was taken into custody after the police chased him down. By that time, the media was on the scene, and as Mark was loaded into a cop car and driven away, he raised his middle finger and flipped off the cameras. Jacoba was then transferred from the hospital in Yaz to the hospital in Goulburn to be with Riana, who had come out of her catatonic state and remembered who she was. Now, with all 5 family members accounted for, the questions began. What on earth had happened here? Mark was eventually released into the care of family members who went to Wangaratta to collect him. And then Jacoba and Riana were released from the hospital in Goulburn. And all of Australia was left wondering what drove this father and mother into madness. Was there some triggering event that took place? Was there something the family wasn't telling them? They were all tested for drugs. They weren't on anything. The public was fascinated with this story and had many questions.
All right, it is the family saga that has really caught the attention of the nation. And this morning, Mark Tromp did return home after a harrowing 5-day search.
That is the good news. The Tromp family travels this week have certainly been somewhat bizarre, and many questions still remain unanswered. So to discuss, we've got Brendan Jones from WSFM coming in, as well as Shell Shock Media's Shelley Horton. Let's go to you, Jonesy, first of all. I mean, it is a fascinating story, but we should be mindful of the fact that we're probably talking about a mental illness here.
Yes.
But still, must be frightening and also somewhat sad that it's gotten to this.
You know, it's like one of the, and you know when you see a horror movie like Nightmare on Elm Street or something, and all this stuff happens, and then you think, who's going to explain this in the end? I'm not saying there's like Freddy Krueger running around, but like it's like the aftermath of one of those things. But it's a group delusion, isn't it? Isn't there such a thing?
So Sandy Ray was on the show earlier talking about that. Yeah,
like people in isolation. They live on a sort of a farm. They're by themselves. They just feed off their own paranoid delusions. Maybe this is what's happening.
Yeah, and it's quite extraordinary because the children, adult children, who have been all caught up in this as well, and finding phones thrown out the windows of cars. I mean, it has been an intriguing. Yeah.
But what about the fact that we know that the phone was thrown out the car window as they were fleeing, which is part of their point that they were being tracked. And you know, so maybe they've got a point.
And it goes
that
back
you
to my
can do
theory of it's like a, after a horror movie.
I think it's,
like Terminator. Remember when Terminator finishes?
Just like
at the end of Sarah Connor, and you think, well, who's going to clean all this up? Who's going to explain that? Maybe. I'm not saying that there's a cyborg from another dimension after them, but
I'm fascinated by this. I'm already seeing it as a telemovie. Like I can see, I don't know if we'll ever have any answers, but the thing is, the only thing that sort of plays on my mind is the fact that he was flipping the bird to the media.
Yeah.
Maybe he's the charismatic cult leader who's convinced his family of something. I don't know.
But that might fall into, I mean, Sandy was talking about how you can go through these psychotic episodes, so that might have been a result of that. Anyway.
Yeah.
And fortunately, everyone has come out of this, well, because that was the big issue, that they've got their father back, and it's Father's Day. That is the good end result out of what
I thought at first that Trump had gone missing.
I
saw that when Trump's gone missing. I'm like, well, there you go.
No.
Speaking of delusion.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Up next, we'll take a look at the...
After the family was reunited and some time had passed, Mark Tromp released a statement to the press. He said, "I apologize for the hurt and concern caused by these events." He then paid respect to community resources devoted to finding the family. One officer that worked the case told the media, "This is the most bizarre case I've seen in 30 years." Another officer who actually knows the family said they had no diagnosed mental health problems, and like I said, there was no evidence of drug use. Some social media theories had suggested that the family was on drugs. The family did not have any debts, and they didn't belong to any religious group. The cop said, "This is just a massive meltdown. I'm sure of it. I've never seen anything like it. It's really hard to explain or put a word on it, but they were just fearing for their lives, and they decided to flee." Mitchell later said, quote, "It was a buildup of different normal everyday events, just pressure, and it slowly got worse as the days went by." It's really interesting how we deal with pressure. Some people handle pressure really well, and some people don't. And then sometimes people handle pressure really well for a long time, and then Ella Tromp was charged with car theft, but none of the other family members faced legal troubles. Some people theorize that the family was affected by chemicals used on the farm, but most experts believe this was a real case of folie à deux, madness of two, the very rare psychological condition I spoke of earlier in the episode. Riana later gave an interview to Woman's Day magazine, and she said, "You do start thinking the same. You have a few things and they do build up. You can get sick in some way." Ella spoke during a press conference and said, "It is very confusing. I still feel confused. I think our state of minds weren't in the best place. And yeah, I can't even there's no way I can explain a reason for it. It's just bizarre." Mitchell said he couldn't explain what happened, but that he never shared his father's sense of danger. He said, "I just had to go with the family because I wanted to see where they were going. I couldn't leave them. But yeah, it was tough to see your family members like that. And I've never seen anyone like that. But the main thing is they're okay now. Everyone is safe. Everyone is well. So we can just go back to being a family again." The Tromps have kept a low profile since the incident. Ella's charges for stealing the car were ultimately withdrawn because the owner of the vehicle did not want to pursue charges. This is, like I said, one of the strangest stories I've ever heard, a dark story I thought you would enjoy. I think it's a good reminder that our mental state can become very fragile very quickly. You know, we talk a lot about mental health here on Dark Hearts, the importance of seeking help if you feel you need it, the importance of medication, of counseling. But I don't know that anything could have been done to prevent the most bizarre road trip ever. I'm just glad the Tromps are safe and well, and I hope that they are thriving. Thank you for joining me today on Dark Hearts with Stacey Lee. I sure appreciate you. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more from me. It helps a lot. You know, I've got my podcast. It is Dark Hearts with Stacey Lee. I post brand new episodes every Monday and Wednesday on Apple, Spotify, and Amazon. And this is our fundraiser. If you've got a few extra bucks you want to give to a good cause, watch this short video and learn how to help us. We are trying to solve some cold cases. I sure hope you're well, and I truly appreciate and value each and every one of you. Stay safe, my friends, and be kind to each other. And I will see you next time on Dark Hearts with Stacey Lee. Bye.